Warning, this podcast has stories of real-life events and true crime that happens every day. These stories may contain adult language and graphic or disturbing details not suitable for everyone. Listener discretion is advised.
132 in Bush, I've got him at gunpoint.
They're pulling them out.
911, advise ready for escape.
Welcome to another episode of War Stories. I'm Tom.
And I'm Chuck.
And we have one of our favorites back. Ken, how are you, sir?
I'm good. Always good to be with you guys.
Ken is I like to call him the background whisperer.
That's me.
Yeah. In fact, if you don't have backgroundwhisperer.com, you should register that. I think.
That's so cool. That'd be easy to remember.
Right. Exactly. Ken is here, and it kind of came about because here's the thing. We all talk, when we're not on the show as well. And there's some reactionary policy coming out now that we instantly started talking about on social media. And we thought that'd make a good show to talk to you guys about, because it's probably, I would say, outside of law enforcement, a very misunderstood technique or tactic, if you will.
It's this whole reimagining of police too.
Yeah, for sure.
And it's crazy.
So we are going to talk about what the hell is a pretext stop and why people want to get rid of them and how that is a terrible idea.
Very bad idea.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So let's just, I think, jump right into it, shall we, boys? Ken, why don't you explain to everyone what is a pretext stop?
A pretext stop is where a copper's on the road, and it doesn't matter where you are. It could be anywhere, and you see a car in a bad area, and you see that they have a broken tail light, or their license plate light is out, or the signal's not working, and you decide, I have a legal right to make this traffic stop. So that's the pretext. And then when you stop them, you find guns in the car, you find criminals, you get their driver's license as a course of duty, you run their license, their driver's license, and they're a wanted felon. Murderers have been caught using this technique. It's perfectly legal.
Oh yeah, we'll get into it.
Legal.
Yeah. And so let's I'll give you a for instance, because I used pretext stops a lot. And any cop that isn't doing his job. How's that? I'll just say that right out the gate. I would use pretext stops. There's a vehicle code section in California that requires you during hours of darkness to have your license plate properly illuminated while operating a motor vehicle.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds all highfalutin, but guess what? That little teeny weeny dinky license plate light that lights up your back plate when you drive around at night, that's a requirement in California.
Yep.
Yeah.
And if it is not lit at night, that's a violation, period. It's in the vehicle code. You pull somebody over, you can write them a ticket, make them fix it. You can tell them about it and warn them. But regardless, it is in fact on the books. You can't do it. It's just like a broken taillight. It's just like, it's an equipment violation.
Well, I'll go one further. There are now places that are saying, oh, you don't have plates in the car, no front plate? No, you can't pull over for that. You can't do that.
Right.
Oh,
and that's another good example. In California, you're required to have a front license plate on your car.
Yeah.
However, what we would do is we'd be driving out at 12 o'clock at night, 12:30 at night. If you were in the area of a bar, or if you, all kinds of things. If you're in a drug neighborhood and you see a car that is suspicious and you want to investigate it for either drug activity, or you want to investigate it for a DUI, or you want to, whatever you want to investigate it for, you see that there is a de facto, an actual violation, right? It doesn't matter what is in your heart. It doesn't matter that you're like, this guy might be drunk. It doesn't matter that this guy might have a warrant. It doesn't matter that this guy might be, wanted. The fact remains, there is an on the books violation on the vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
So you pull them over for that. That's it. Now, if the dope comes, or if the drunk driver comes out, like whatever comes out of that car, It doesn't matter because you had a legal, lawful reason to stop them, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And to, I mean, basically what they're saying is all those little tiny ticky-tacky administrative laws, you can't enforce them anymore because we can't tell if you're enforcing it because you want to stop them for other reasons or if you want to stop them just because of that violation. I don't quite get. I mean, maybe you guys can explain it to me. I don't understand how you cannot stop somebody for a real violation.
So check this out. There's been word that's come out, and they're saying that that minorities get pulled over more than let's white people, right? And so they're saying that this is to protect the minorities because they're the ones who are getting pulled over for the chicken shit violations that are ended up leading to prison times or jail sentences because they had unregistered firearm in the car, concealed firearm, felon with a firearm, and all this other stuff. But you're still out committing crimes, and that's crazy to enact a law and saying, well, you can't pull anybody over for a pretext stop, for expired registration, no front plate, or other things, because this is we believe it's targeting minorities. And I've heard of that coming out, and that's a lot of the reasons why a lot of this reimagining is going on of police and law enforcement agencies.
Right.
Well, there's a lot to it. There are departments. See, they can't make it illegal for cops to stop doing this. I mean, to do this, they are making department policies that their officers won't do this. And the other thing is that depending on the demographics of the area those officers are working on, like if you work in a say South Central Los Angeles or Atlanta, or I don't even know what other parts of the state, but other states. But if you work in an area that's predominantly, let's say, Hispanic and Black, and then the majority of the crimes are being committed by Blacks and Hispanics, then those are going to be the criminals. Yeah, it's demographics. If you work in Georgia, in whatever Georgia, and it's Bubba on his tractor is doing drive-bys, you're going to concentrate on Bubba or gang members who are bikers. I mean, it just depends on the demographics.
I'll give you a perfect example and you had said you didn't know other cities, but I happen to work near a city in Central California, just north of Santa Barbara. It's Santa Maria. And the area around Santa Maria is famous for vineyards. It's wine country. It's
tri-tip.
it's tri-tip. It's good tri-tip too. But the migrant farmer population in the city of Santa Maria and the nearby city of Guadalupe is large, very large. Okay. Now, if I were to tell you that 65% of all of the car stops done by Santa Maria PD, and this is, to the best of my knowledge, when I left, these are real numbers, like 60 to 65% of all the car stops done by Santa Maria PD are done on Hispanics. You'd be like, wait a minute. Out of all they don't pull over Hispanics 33% of the time and whites 33% of the time and blacks 33% of the time. No, they pull over Hispanics 65% of the time. And you say, wait a minute, that's way, 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 way too much. They're way over enforcing on Hispanics. And I say, okay, that's your opinion based on the statistical data, just looking at that number. Now, what if I tell you that Santa Maria's Hispanic population is actually 80% Hispanic? Like all of Santa Maria's people, 80% of the people that live there are Hispanic. So when you actually look at the numbers and you say, wait a minute, 80% of the people who live there are Hispanic, but they're only getting pulled over 65% of the total car stops, they're actually being underrepresented according to their demographic. If you work in an area where 1 in 1,000 people is white and the other 999 of them are black, guess what? The ratio should be 999 to 1 car stops of blacks versus whites if it's going to be equal. So by that rationale, you can't just look at statistical data of race when pulling people over. You have to look at statistical data of race in the context of the greater issue, which is the goddamn makeup of the city.
And when here's the bottom line, though. The reason that they're doing this is because they're saying people of color are getting pulled over at a higher percentage than say white people. But the
Right.
thing is, the cops are not pulling people over because, hey, there's a brown guy. They're pulling him over based on the crime maps in the area that they're working.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
if, you know,
Also, what I think is funny is that they nixed it in certain areas, all in general, because they know you cannot tell who's driving most vehicles. You can't tell race,
Yeah.
color, creed, ethnicity.
Right.
You can't, because a lot of cars have tint or the sun or a glare or the car is going fast, but you see a violation. You're like, okay, well, it's a late model Honda, Toyota, or this is a kind of a vehicle we're looking for, or it has no plates. And that's a dead giveaway, especially in California, that you were supposed to have plates because they've made that a law now. Everyone has plates, even from the dealer. You have plates
Yeah,
in
the
your
paper
car.
plates have to have a
Exactly.
number on 'em.
And so I think it's funny that they're like, well, no, you can't do any of this, because they know deep down you cannot tell most vehicles who's behind the wheel. So how are people targeting?
I don't
people?
think
You're
I
not.
don't
You
think
just
they
can't
know
see.
that deep down. I don't think they acknowledge it. I think they are willfully ignorant, and they try to pretend that cops genuine.
That too.
And hey, to be fair, yes, there are times when you can tell the race of a driver, like they pass you, you see through the window, whatever. But I can honestly tell you that other than a specific racial descriptor in a suspect broadcast, the race of the driver has never entered into a single car stop I've ever made. Period. End of story.
Right.
Now, does that mean if I saw a white kid in a BMW at 3:30 in the morning in South Central LA on a dope corner, I'd pull that kid over because he was white in a BMW in a dope neighborhood that's predominantly black at 3:30 in the morning in South Central. Why? Because something's not right. That's not racial profiling. That's social, I guess, social profiling. It's something that sticks out, right? And if the guy says, "Oh no, my girlfriend's black, I'm just dropping her off," I go, "Okay, bye, have a nice night," and then that's a reasonable explanation for why they're there. But if he's like, yeah, no, I mean, and he doesn't know why he's there, then must start to dig a little deeper, because that's called police work.
yeah,
Right.
yeah. It's,
It
I
cuts
think,
both ways.
yeah, I think that this is just another social justice move on the part of politicians, and all it's going to do is it's not going to make people feel better. It's going to make citizens more at risk, because a lot of times during these pretext stops where criminals are stopped and arrested with guns or whatever in the car, that you stop someone from committing a crime, and that's going to come to a
Right.
halt.
Yeah. And we're going to get into that, because one of the things we want to talk about is what a successful and effective tool that pretext stops can be when you look at the history of them. But let's talk about some other policy, because I think this is short-sighted. To me, this is a reactionary policy change, much the same way it was when they took away the carotid restraint, much the way it was when in California, I think it was the entire California Highway Patrol was ordered under policy to stop towing cars for people who did not have a driver's license. Now, here's why. They were told if somebody's pulled over and they don't have a driver's license, they don't have it on them, right? There's a different statute for I have a driver's license, I just don't possess the actual card on me. And then you write somebody a little ticket that says, "Hey, dumbass, remember to carry your license with you when you're driving a car." Most of the time you won't do that unless they're just being a total Adam Henry asshole, for those of you who don't know. But if they actually have never been issued a driver's license, which is different than driving on a suspended license. This is somebody who literally never went, took the test, has no license. You can tow their car by law, right? But the California Highway Patrol was ordered not to tow the cars for that violation. Now, the reason was who in California would be the most likely to not possess a driver's license. That would probably be someone who can't obtain one. And the people that can't obtain them are people without proper documentation that they are in this country legally. So if you are not in this country legally and you cannot obtain a license, but you're driving around, guess what happens when you get pulled over? They're going to tow your car. Well, immediately towing someone's car for not having a license got branded as racist, because there was
Yeah,
a
did.
crap ton of cars that were being towed from Hispanics. Well, that's not racist. It just so happens to be that the predominant number of people that didn't have a license were Hispanic because they were undocumented illegal immigrants.
So to speak on that, which is funny, is that there was a 30-day hold thing. If certain things you could meet, you could hold the car for 30 days and do a 30-day hold on it.
Right.
That got nixed, and people were
quick
saying
writing in a hurry. Yep.
no more 30-day holds. It is
Mhm.
unfair to those of people of less fortune who basically cannot afford stuff, and they linked it to minorities without saying minorities, even though in California it's not necessarily the case in certain areas, and it's the majority or the median. And
I
it's
don't
crazy.
necessarily disagree with that in some instances, because I will say that what Chuck's talking about, for those of you who don't know, and again, we're speaking of California law, but there are many similar laws across the nation. Like it's not that one state comes up with a law and other states are like, well, that's stupid, I'm not doing that. It's more like, oh, that's a good law, we should do that too. And when you have people getting their car towed, there's an option to not just tow it, but impound it and seize it for an entire 30 days where they can't get it back for 30 days. Well, what does that mean? Tow fees, impound lot fees, like you're going to have to pay for storage of that car at the tow yard. So when they go to get it out 30 days later, it's going to be the tow cost, the cost to get the car back, the cost to get the registration, the cost, all that stuff, at plus 30 days worth of impound fees that they have to pay before they can get the car back. And guess what? Most of those shit boxes aren't worth what it costs to store them for 30 days.
But the
So
politicians, good.
No, I was just saying. So what happens? Well, they don't pick up the car. They just leave it and it goes to auction, right? So I understand to some extent why saying, okay, the 30 days of impound fees impacts their ability to go to work, their ability to earn money, and then their ability to pay the fees to get the car out. So we need to revisit how we do that. That's a different conversation than 30-day impounds are racist, which they're not. They're 30-day impounds.
So the politicians, they weren't concerned that somebody was out there who didn't have a license to drive,
Right,
and could put the population at risk by not having a license. They couldn't get insurance. So in the
Right.
event that they hit somebody, there was no insurance to cover those people. And the thing is, though, it wasn't a change in the law, it was a change in policy.
right.
So when you do that, so now it's a hardship on illegal immigrants to be able to get their car out of impound. Okay, so it's a financial hardship. So what happens when you stop the white guy who doesn't have his license on him? And is that racist because you tow his car?
Right. So if you're allowed to tow a white person's car and impound it for 30 days because they're white, but you're not allowed to do it to a Hispanic person, that is racist.
Or what about this? The person who's had multiple DUIs, had a suspended license, is driving on a suspended license. You pull him over, he's in clear violation. He doesn't have registration, everything's suspended. I think it's 1461.1, I think. I could be wrong, but it's a subsection of this, driving on a suspended license. And you have the authority and the right to impound it for 30 days. But based on that whole policy or policies from other agencies, you're not able to do it. And then you're like, okay, well, I have to give him a reasonable amount of time to get someone to come and get the car. And then even though you can't get someone to get the car, you're like, okay, well, just walk and leave it here. And you come back, 10 minutes later on your regular patrol route, the car's gone and he's back in there driving it. And now he gets into a DUI later on down the road and smokes someone. Whereas if you could have just impounded that car for 30 days, he's probably not going to get that car back. And you've taken a dangerous drunk driver off the road who is willfully driving on a suspended license due to multiple DUIs.
Right. Yeah, because
things like that.
The way they changed the policy, they said that they're not going to tow the car if they can call somebody and they're licensed and they can drive the car away. They're going to drive it down a couple blocks and then they're going to swap seats.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. And okay,
so if they show up, they park their car, they leave with that car, they come back to get their car.
Right.
Like, all right, go.
Yep.
Now, here's the thing. I understand some of the I understand some of the feelings behind it. I'm not going to pretend I don't, because I worked in a very, very white and Hispanic neighborhood area, right? It was probably, I would say, 50% white, 40% Hispanic, 10% like 8% black, 2% other. That's really like, if I were to hazard a guess just off the top of my head, that's probably right. Because with the black families in town, you know, I think as a general rule, we kind of knew a lot of them because there weren't very many. But when it came to some of the white tweakers, you couldn't swing a dead cat without hitting a white tweaker. It was just an awful place for what, just tweakers. So from that perspective, I used to get really upset when we would get dispatched to a call, and I've talked to watch commanders, I've talked to dispatchers, because I have been dispatched to calls because the caller says, "Hey, there's a suspicious man walking around my neighborhood." And I say, "What?" And the dispatcher says, "What's suspicious about him?" And say, "It was a, black male in his early 20s, and I've never seen him before." And I went, "We're not going to that. No, we're not going to that." And there's a name for it. It's the name for it was walking while black. You can look up articles. There's driving while black, there's walking while black. And it's one of the most dumb, idiotic, racist, like stupid shit. And guess what? A lot of times it is not generated by the cops. It's generated by Gladys Kravitz looking at her fucking blinds and seeing some dude just trying to collect for charity or sell candy bars door to door for, his school or whatever, but she's never seen him before. And he's got darker skin. Maybe he's Hispanic, maybe he's black. And so fucking Gladys Kravitz calls the police station. And unfortunately for my department, it was, if you call, we show up. Right.
It's like a lot
Isn't
of
that that just happened where these guys, this father, son, and some third guy got convicted in some state.
I think was it a shot Aubrey?
Yeah, Ahmad Aubrey.
Ahmad
I
Aubrey?
don't want to say the name wrong, but that's because
it was the opposite of Kyle Rittenhouse. They all got convicted.
And he looked suspicious. He was a black guy, looked suspicious.
Right.
And so
He's just walking.
So now they're in prison. They're not going to see daylight.
No.
Yeah. Now, I, as being the person that I am, I would try to get my way to see my way out of going to those calls, because that I would tell the watch commander, I'm like, "Are we really going to that?" And a lot of times the watch commander would look at the call and say, "No, we're not going to that. There's not enough there, And so we would have the dispatcher call the person back and say, "Hey, call and let us know if there's something more suspicious, but we're not coming out just for somebody walking down your neighborhood. That's not illegal." However, if there was no way I could avoid it, I would go, and generally I would be UTL, which is unable to locate. And you get out there and they're just gone. Now, that doesn't mean I didn't see them.
Not GOA.
It just means
Gone on arrival.
It just means that when I got there, I didn't see anything suspicious. So that must not be the person that they were talking about, right? They said it was a suspicious person. I drove by this very nice person of color, whether they're Hispanic, black, whatever, and they were just walking down the street minding their own business. I am not going to jam them up just because Gladys Kravitz called the cops, period. I'm just going to be unable to locate her. They're going to be GOA, period. End of story.
Yeah.
That's what good cops should do. Does that always happen? No, it doesn't. But here's the little secret. If they dispatched a black cop to that and he went, and they dispatched a white cop to that and he went, and they dispatched a Hispanic cop to that and he went, they're getting dispatched to a call and they're just doing their job. So if it's something where a citizen is calling it in and complaining, you can't put that on the police. They're not proactively going after people for driving while black or walking while black or, anything like that. But I do understand the reason why people want to have this conversation. And I think it's a good conversation to have. However, taking away one of the most effective tools that law enforcement has, similar to the carotid restraint, taking away pretext stops. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sure you've heard of Ted Bundy. Ted Bundy was one of the most disgusting, depraved, vicious serial killers of
Oh,
all
yeah.
time. I remember as a child, as a small child, as a wee little babe.
A little bit.
No, I was actually probably, I don't want to say, but I remember when Ted Bundy was executed. And I remember when the photos got leaked to the press of his body after he'd been electrocuted in the electric chair in Florida.
Ooh.
And I was fascinated because I wanted to see what this serial killer looked like after he'd been executed. And so I looked him up, and that, I started to read more about Ted Bundy. And then the older I got, the more in depth I got. But one of the biggest things that stuck out to me was that one of the first times Ted Bundy ever got caught, and we're talking, he had left a trail of dead bodies in multiple states at this point. One of the first times he'd ever been caught was on a damn traffic stop.
Yep.
Now, in this case, it wasn't the traffic stop wasn't intended to be a pretext stop, right? Because let's face it, you see a guy driving out of a drug neighborhood and he's got no license plates on his car. You're like, well, he's driving out of a drug neighborhood. I don't give a shit about the plates. I'm going to pull him over for the plates, but I'm going to look for dope.
Yeah.
That's legal. In Ted Bundy's case, the cop just pulled him over because he had been, I think, speeding. And then when he pulls him over, he starts to get into it and realizes that something ain't right. And he hooks him up, and sure as shit, catches himself a serial killer. Well, what if the court says that is a pretext stop and Ted Bundy has to be let go because the probable cause for his arrest was no good? Is that really what you want?
No.
Because guess what? Ted Bundy did get out. He escaped. He escaped after that pretext stop, and he made it to Florida, where he terrorized a sorority house and brutalized a bunch of college-age women before he was eventually caught for the last time and then subsequently tried, convicted, and executed. If that pretext stop had never happened, and well, let's go back. The pretext stop happens, but instead of Ted Bundy escaping, the courts or the department say, no, that's not in policy. You were out of policy when you did it. So we're going to have to throw this out and let him go. Then the department is releasing Ted Bundy back into the wild to viciously and brutally beat and rape the corpses of college co-eds in Florida.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, and if you stop someone like that, that's my whole thing I was saying before. You're stopping them before they commit a crime. And it's for the greater good. And, and further in Bundy's story, he was only convicted of 2 murders, but he confessed to 28 murders, including the rape and murder of a 12-year-old.
Yep.
God, Jesus.
And, and if it was today and they stopped this pretext stops, and you could have caught a Ted Bundy before any of this crap happened. I mean, are you gonna bitch and moan that you stopped Ted Bundy because he was, whatever? I mean,
right.
what's the greater good, and what's the bottom line? What's the end game on making these kinds of policies?
Right. What is your goal? Are you trying to make society less safe?
No, what it is. I'll tell you exactly what it is. It's trying to appease the woke liberal agenda. That's all it is. It's to save face. It's to save departments that
we know
have
that.
had
I just meant
and stuff like that.
As a society, we need to really question what their motives are. And if they're politically motivated like that, then we need to have an honest discussion about how that's a terrible idea.
Yeah.
Well,
I'll give you a for instance.
Okay.
In 1983, I was working with a probationer. It was nighttime. We were working graveyard morning watch. Stopped a car. I can't tell you, exactly what it was, but we stopped him on a pretext stop, probably a vehicle code violation of some kind. I walk up to the car. It's this big black man. I mean, he was buff. So I'm looking in the car, shining my light in there. Next to him is a sawed-off shotgun. So I tell my partner, we pull him out of the car. Turns out he's an ex-con. He's got a sawed-off shotgun. Now, the bottom line for me is today in this conversation that we're having right now. So
right.
where was he going? Where was an ex-con going with a sawed-off shotgun next to him?
Right.
He had an appointment at a very, very short range skeet tournament.
Skeet shooting. Yeah, skeet shooting.
But in 2022, I couldn't stop him.
Right.
No.
No.
What about?
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, what about Timothy McVeigh?
Timothy McVeigh.
I
Another
mean,
story.
there's another one. Well,
The
tell them
Oklahoma
about it
City
because
bomber?
maybe people because Timothy McVeigh was another one.
Yeah.
He,
I mean,
Timothy McVeigh is, you're talking about and that's a white kid. Ted Bundy's a white kid. Like these aren't tools that are getting used specifically against minorities or people of color or Hispanics or blacks. Like they do get used against everybody. I think the argument is becoming, are they disproportionately used against minorities? And then that goes back to our argument about demographics. Well, how do we know if they're getting disproportionately used? Where are they getting used and against who and in what context? Because without context, we know nothing, right?
Yeah.
I have.
And
Oh, I'm sorry. Go for it.
I was going to say, it goes back to what Chuck was saying. You can't see who's in the car. How is it that I mean, is it just to make people feel good that you can't stop anybody?
Right.
You don't know who's in
Right.
the car. So you're not stopping them because they match this, that, or the other. It's demographics again.
And
Yeah.
I'll say this: I was working in a drug neighborhood one time, and I was working with a young officer who was still in training, and we were in a neighborhood. And I look at a car to my left, no front plate. I'm like, cool. I look up, the driver looks at me, looks away, and I'm like, so I slowly make my turn, and I'm like, hey, we're gonna stop this car. He's like, well, what's the probable cause? And I'm like, well, since you don't trust me, it's no front plate. And he has to have a front plate. There's nothing in the windshield, nothing. It's not affixed to the front. You have to, we can have the right to stop him. He's like, okay. I said, just watch the passenger side. We whip on him, pull him over. He stops. We get out of the car. Long story short, pull him out because as I'm walking up to the vehicle, it is packed to the top with manufacturing goods of narcotics. And I can tell this because there's pressure cookers, there's all these siphons and shit like that, and like resin.
And
in
hell,
there.
pressure cooker could be a bomb making materials.
Yeah. And that's my next story. I pull his ass out. Long story short, he had all of the makings, everything, all the toxic chemicals and the rubbish for the marijuana to cook down honey oil. Now in a honey oil lab, if you do it wrong and you do it backwoods or whatever, you can blow your house up. I've been in numerous house fires where people are blown up, kids are blown up, and this shit is caustic, it's nasty, and we stopped them. And that's how a lot of good stops and a lot of people are put away, for dangerous drugs and narcotics, for murders, for bombings, for shit like that. And it all stems from good, solid police work. Another one that I was not a part of, but it made national headlines, or at least in California. The officers were working close to Los Angeles airport. Pull over a car for some sort of pretextual stop the car. Long story short, they found a shit ton of bomb making material in that vehicle. Bomb squad comes out, clears it. Then they go back to his residence, get a warrant, open up the residence. This dude had tripwires, had everything set in his apartment, and it was a manufacturing facility inside of an apartment for bomb making material. Plus there was I think manifestos of where he was going to go, who he wanted to blow up and shit like that. And they were able to stop a mass casualty event of a mass bomb. That is good, solid police work. And you cannot do that anymore.
So let's talk about unintended consequences. And again, everybody who listens to the show long enough knows that one of my favorite assignments, in fact, my favorite assignment to ever work, was narcotics, right? And which is silly considering how libertarian I am, and like my views on narcotics is like, hey, open up the opium dens and let people go back in and shoot up till they die, and then we'll just throw them out in the trash after they're done. Like sign a waiver that's saying, hey, you can come in and shoot up safely here, but if you die, we don't have to give you Narcan. We don't have to call the ambulance. We'll just take your dead ass corpse and throw it in the bin in the back, and then the city will come pick up the bodies once a week and burn them. Like if you want to sign up for that, I'm all for it. I don't care. Like blow your brains out. It literally, I'm not going to stop you. I can't stop you, so I'm not going to try. I just want to create an environment where you go do it somewhere privately and stop screwing with the rest of us. My grandfather, as many people have known who's listened to the show, said, do whatever you want, just don't do it in the street and scare the horses. Right. that was his philosophy. And I very much believe in a lot of that. However, narcotics is fun because it's cat and mouse. It's chasing. It's almost like being a spy, right? There are very similar In fact, I went to an anti-terrorism class when I became a terrorism liaison officer, and one of the guys that was an instructor, we went out to lunch one time, and he had worked previously for the CIA, and he says that the CIA actually really does love it when narcotics investigators decide to make the jump to a 3-letter agency in the feds and go to intelligence, because doing anti-terrorism cell work is very similar to doing anti-narcotics cell work. It's finding out the hierarchy, it's finding out who the drop man is, it's finding out, all that kind of, it's the same work. The only difference is it's bombs versus drugs, right? Well, I loved working narcotics. It was a brain teaser. The surveillance was cool, all this stuff. There is something that I want to talk about that will be an unintended victim of this policy, which is wall stops. And
bring that up.
yeah. So for those of you who don't know, and without giving too much away, when you're working on a narcotics investigation, the narcotics detectives develop all kinds of probable cause, whether it's based on a wire, whether it's based on an informant, whether it's based on surveillance. They have all these different ways that they can generate probable cause. But guess what? They don't want to tell you how they generated the probable cause. They don't want to give away their investigative secrets, right? So theoretically, let's say you're working a wire case. In fact, I'll give an example from a wire case I worked. I worked a wire case, and we had a tracker on a vehicle that we suspected was going to Mexico and having narcotics somewhere in the vehicle. They were putting it in the frame, putting it in a hidden compartment. They were packing the vehicle with the narcotics somehow because of the way the patterns were evolving. And so when this vehicle came back from Mexico one time, we were able to see that it had just crossed the border into the United States. The debate became, how do we get the dope out of the car, or find out if there's dope in the car to confirm our suspicions? And if we smash the car as a full narcotics team with all the stuff that we generated with the informants and the wiretap and all this stuff, if we smash that car and we come up with dope, then when we go to court, guess what we're going to have to do, people? It's called discovery. We're going to have to lay out our case. We're going to have to tell this drug smuggler how we were able to come up with enough probable cause to stop their car. And that will reveal that there's an informant. That will reveal that there's a narcotics investigation. That will reveal that there may be a wiretap. It will reveal all of these things, right? Now, there's ways to try and delay that, but you can't stop it. However, there's something called a wall stop. And a wall stop means that you call a patrol car and you tell the patrol car, find a reason to pull it over. And then the patrol car finds one little sections in the 47,000 million sections of the vehicle code that this car violated, whether it's no front plate, cracked windshield, license plate light, I didn't put my blinker on 100 yards before a turn, whatever the hell it is, you actually did it. You violated the law, and I'm stopping you for it. Period. End of story. So now the report says patrol officer stopped a car for no blinker. Subsequent to that stop, I found 13 pounds of dope. Right? So now the investigators get to confirm that this was a smuggling vehicle, that it was smuggling dope. And they know in their report, they can say, we suspected this car was smuggling dope. A patrol officer pulled this car over, found a bunch of dope, confirming our suspicions. And yet we don't actually have to give up why we suspected it, because he found his own probable cause and he found his own way into the car. And now we can continue our investigation. And we don't have to stop at the 13 pounds that were in that car that we ripped. We can actually go to the next level and see if we can get the manufacturer, or see if we can get the carts. Who knows? Right? That's a wall stop. You take away the ability to do a pretext traffic stop, and you can't wall off the stop. You can't hide your probable cause for stopping the car. You have to give up your case in chief. Do you know how many drug cases, major drug cases that involve things like surveillance, wiretaps, and confidential informants are made with wall stops? I mean, I would venture to say that they are vital to 80 to 90% of narcotics cases.
Yeah, but
I
Tom,
agree.
you're not being sensitive.
Yeah,
You're right. Well, let's face it, I get routinely accused of not being sensitive. In fact, I'm not sure I've ever been accused of being sensitive, with the exception of my wife when she talks shit to me.
And I'm sure Ken has seen his fair share of, done his fair share of wall stops and seen his fair share of, career felons, probably murderers and things like that, get stopped and put away based on a simple pretextual stop. I mean, I know I've worked a lot alongside with narcotics groups and stuff like that, and done a numerous amount of wall stops, and been able to make an arrest or just get info on someone, that they needed info on, and things like that to solidify their case. And I mean, you're right. You take that stuff away, you're basically crippling units that do stuff like that, and then they're not able to make the ultimate bust, and they're only able to make small time busts, and it lets the whole organization know, okay, well, we can't do that because they're on to us, and then we have to change the whole thing up, and then you never get another shot at it. And there's all these crazy, like, people who are put away that are found on simple traffic violations, equipment violations, things like that.
Yep.
It's crazy. I mean,
You could actually probably look up. There's probably a list. And actually, Ken, I think we go back to because you had an Instagram post about this, did you not? By the way, if anybody wants to follow Ken, what's your Instagram?
LA_backgrounds13.
Yeah, LA_backgrounds13. That's the. Maybe you should see if Background Whisperer is taken on Instagram too.
I actually have a list here that I can go through with you on pretextual stops. So I'll just go through this list. May 1983, Orange County, California. Randy Kraft was stopped for a DUI stop. A young man's body was found in the front seat during a car search. He was later convicted of killing 16 men. January 1992, Riverside, California. William Lester Suff committed an illegal U-turn, expired tags, and suspended license. Detectives noted his license plate was seen at a dump site where several murder victims were found. Suff was convicted of 12 murders spanning 16 years. And June 1993, New York, Joel Rifkin stopped for no license plate. A woman's body was found in the car. He was convicted of 7 murders. April 1993, Washington, D.C., James E. Swan, 2 red light violations, recently fired shotgun found in his truck. He was later convicted of 4 murders and 10 attempted murders. Those are just examples.
And you just pulled those out of thin air. Like, that's not in-depth research into actual criminal case files to give you statistics and data on how effective pretext traffic stops can be. And here's the thing. In all those cases, Ken, you and I cannot say one way or the other whether the police officers were suspicious of the driver and then found a reason to pull them over, or if it was blind fucking luck and they saw a violation, pulled them over, and it was just accidental that they happened to pull the person over with a dead body in the car.
Yeah.
So you have, in my opinion, made my strongest case for keeping pretext stops illegal, or legal, I should say, or in policy, because they're not trying to make them illegal.
Yeah.
And that's simply this. My friends and I said years ago, if you don't want to get caught doing stupid shit, don't do stupid shit.
right.
Okay. That was kind of our mantra. If you don't want to get arrested for DUI, don't drive drunk, number 1. But number 2, don't drive drunk on expired tags. Don't drive drunk without a front plate. Like, don't leave a party after having 1 extra questionable beer with your license plate light out, right? Mm-hmm. These are the things we're saying. If you're Joel Rifkin, I'm talking to you, Joel. I mean, let's face it, Joel. If you didn't check your entire car from stem to stern and do a full-blown vehicle inspection to make sure that your car completely complied with the vehicle code. And then if you didn't comply with every single traffic law driving that dead woman's body from point A to point B, you fucked up. Like,
Mhm.
Yeah.
that's your own fault. You deserve what you get. So what
Yep.
you're saying is that criminals can be stupid and do awful, heinous things, but police officers who know criminals are stupid and do awful, heinous things are not allowed to enforce laws knowing that the criminals do awful, stupid, heinous things, because there's a chance that at some point in their heart, they made a racist decision to pull that person over because of the color of their skin and rather than the violation that actually occurred in front of them. So what you have just done is effectively impugned the integrity of every single law enforcement officer in your department by saying, look, we think most of you assholes are doing this to be mean, and so we're going to take it away from you, rather than standing up for them and saying, no, most of our guys are doing it right. And when we find the ones that are doing it wrong, we run them out of town on a rail. So that's what should happen.
I think it goes back to the whole, well, we have to appease the woke, agenda, because there's less agencies, or there's a good amount of agencies that back their officers and and back the stuff they do, especially in Florida. And you see it come out a lot on national television and stuff like that. But then you have other agencies that it's like a plague to back their officers when they've done the right thing. It may not look great, but it's completely within policy. It's completely within, federal guidelines and everything like that. And they just don't back officers. And it's they're afraid of offending a group or starting a riot or think something like that, or an unlawful assembly. But at the end of the day, that's your job, is to keep the peace and to keep law and order. And if you can't do that, what business do you have in law enforcement?
Well,
I never went to court, or I never heard about a court case where the defendant's lawyer said, hey, we'd like to have this case thrown out because even though this defendant was arrested for a heinous crime, we want it thrown out because we think he was stopped for the color of his skin. I never had a
Right.
suspect who I arrested go, hey, besides the guns, the drugs, the felony warrant that I had, the stolen car I was in, I just want to make a complaint because the color of my
Right.
skin. Never.
Well, right. And so I want to also get into something that I think has a little bit of bearing, because again, everything in life is a Pandora's box to some degree. Once you unlock it, the unintended consequences of letting other things out of the box are real. Now, for those of you that have never heard of a pretext stop, or have only heard of it called a pretext stop, it is also called a Terry stop. And if you hear it called a Terry stop, you are talking to an old school copper. Because the reason it might be called the Terry stop is there was a case called Terry versus Ohio. Okay. And in Terry versus Ohio, it's just a stop for reasonable suspicion of a crime, right? Just to stop for reasonable suspicion of a crime. It's not even a pretext stop. It's just, I don't have a violation. I have a suspicion, a reasonable officer with my training and experience would look at this situation and say a crime is occurring, right? That case was decided in what, 1968, right? And then I think Wren versus the United States was the actual pretext stop case, and that was 1996. Well, if you want to go all the way back to Terry and say, well, cops can't stop people with no probable cause just based on reasonable suspicion. So what you're saying is that we can start to go back and look at cases that have already been decided by the Supreme Court as far back as the 60s and reconsider whether they should be legal or not. Because the Supreme Court has already ruled that these are constitutional and legal. And guess what, people? If they were racist, they would not be constitutional. The Supreme Court would not, The Supreme Court, as it was at the time, probably would not have let a law pass and stand as constitutional post Civil Rights Act if it was inherently racist. I'm not talking about going back to Dred Scott and all that kind of stuff, because yes, our country has fucked up. I'm talking about our modern country. Well, that means that the Miranda decision was in 1966. Terry versus Ohio was 1968. Roe versus Wade was 1973. So if you're trying to say that we should start opening up Supreme Court cases and revisiting whether these things are constitutional, you're opening the door to revisit every Supreme Court case since that point and decide whether it's constitutional. And that's an unintended consequence. So folks, you gotta think, if you're calling for pretext stops to end because they're racist and unconstitutional, but you're saying, no. The Supreme Court decided Roe versus Wade in 1973, and how dare you think we should revisit that case? Well, then guess what? You are a hypocrite. You are on the wrong side. Because if it applies to one, it applies to the other. And in the law, at least and for now, while we still have a fair and reasonably equitable legal system to some extent, that will still apply. And people will, the Supreme Court will still say, well, if we can open one case, we can certainly open another.
But the way they're getting around it is they're not challenging the legal aspects of it or the legality of it. They're making
Right.
policy.
Right.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
that
like
is how you know it's political.
Like the whole, you brought it up earlier, Tom, the carotid restraint hold.
Mhm.
Now that has been policy. It's not a law, it's policy, but a lot of states.
Well, no,
have
in
put
California now,
kibosh-
isn't it illegal?
Yeah, I think so.
Well, I was
Yeah,
gonna,
there's
gonna
a
touch on
state
that.
law.
So,
but yeah.
right. So a lot of states have put a kibosh on carotid restraint holds. And so I brought it up one time and I was like, okay, well, this was actually a real scenario that happened, not with me, but with someone else. But I used it as an example. I said, what if me and my partner are on a domestic or something and we get into a fight and this guy starts going for my partner's gun, starts hurting my partner. And I have the full right to take my service weapon out and deliver a contact shot. But what if it's in such a precarious position that I'm afraid I may shoot my partner as well as the suspect? And I don't want to do that. But the suspect is giving me his back and I have a clear shot at a carotid restraint hold and a rear naked choke. Can I do it? And they said, no. And I said, but it's deadly force. They said, well, if you do it, because there's policy against it, you will be fired. But federally, you'll be okay.
You'll be clean in the
But
lawsuit and won't go to
you'll-
jail, but you'll lose
you'll
your
be out
job.
of job. You'll be out of job. I'm like, so the next option is I take my knife out and I stab him with my knife, or I hit him in the head with my baton. So you'd rather have me hit him in the head with my baton, crack his skull open, or stab him a shit ton of times, and hopes that my partner doesn't get killed or seriously injured, when I could have just ended it by a 3-second choke, rendering him unconscious.
Right.
And they're like,
Now, I'll give you a real
shit.
world example of that. I'll give you an actual real world example. These are cops that I worked with. And again, some of the cops I worked with, by the time I came on, one of the guys that I worked with as a sergeant, he had worked the Hillside Strangler case. That should tell you some of the old school guys that I worked with, right?
Mhm.
So this guy, he's fighting with a suspect and he's an old school copper. He ends up on his back and the suspect's on top of him, and his partner comes in, and his partner's young and in training and really like amped. And he's on his back, suspect's on top of him. They're starting to wrestle. It's becoming a bit of a fight for his life because the suspect's going for his gun. Partner shows up, draws their gun and drives the gun into the small of their back and gets ready to contact shot him right through the heart, through the back. And the cop, the sergeant, the old school copper on the bottom goes, "Don't shoot him. Don't shoot him. I'm not wearing a vest." Yeah. So he was an old school copper, wasn't wearing a vest.
Mhm.
He's fighting with this dude, and he's worried that this round from a contact shot at close range is going to be a through and through, go through the suspect and enter him right through the chest. And he's screaming and yelling, "Don't shoot. I'm not wearing a vest." Now, let's just skip past the hilarity of that story and of somebody being dumb enough to go out in the street without a fucking vest on when it's available to them.
Mhm.
Let's go on to the fact that if you're that young rookie cop, what do you do? What do you do? Okay, I taught my guys, hey, brain him with a flashlight, kick him with your boot, hit him with a brick, whatever you got to do. Deadly force is deadly force. If you can't shoot him, if that means you drive your pocket knife into their carotid, or if you slit their throat like a sacred cow, or I don't know. But if there's an option where you can climb on their back, wrap your arm around their neck, make them go unconscious for a few seconds with a less than COVID risk of dying, and then they wake up 7 seconds later with handcuffs on in the back of a police car and go, what the fuck happened? And then the cops go, you were an asshole, man. We had to choke you out. He's like, oh, really? Yeah, it was that or you die.
Right.
I think that suspect would probably choose that option most of the time. Now, let's go with juveniles. What if it's a 17-year-old kid? And you tell the mom, you say, your son was fighting with a police officer. We had a couple of options. So I'm going to give you this hypothetical. Your son's fighting with this police officer. We can either crack his skull with a baton. We can tase him with 50,000 volts of electricity. Or we can apply a restraint around his neck where he'll go to sleep for a few seconds while we get the handcuffs on and put him in the car, and then he'll wake up just fine. Or we can shoot him. Which one is she going to pick? Which one is she going to pick? She's going to pick the carotid restraint every damn day, and twice on Sunday. That's the Lord's Day. So what you're doing, these short-sighted, stupid decisions that are politically motivated, have the unintended consequences of, while they look good on the front end, they're really bad on the back end. And Dan Crenshaw, and I know a lot of people are on the fence about whether he's a rhino or whether he's red flag, all this. I'm not talking about Dan Crenshaw's politics. I'm talking about something he said. And what he said in an interview was, we are more interested in feeling good about what we are doing than we are in actually doing good. And in this case, it's very, very obvious that that's what's happening. We want to feel good about saying we don't want people of color stopped more than they should be, which is the right thing to do, right? It's correct for us to say law enforcement and justice should be blind. That is the correct thing for us to always be saying. But to make us feel like we are doing that, we are willing to do things that A, aren't actually doing that, and B, are detrimental to society. That's that. I mean, you guys can tell me I'm full of shit, but that's the way I see it.
Well, when you look through everything is through a racial lens. Then you come up with these knucklehead policies, taking away the chokehold that has to do with race, pretextual stops, race. Anything that's anti-cop has to do with marginalized segments of society that are getting picked on, rather than keeping the population safe.
Right.
Yeah.
And I get it. I understand. We want, like, one of my favorite shows, and I would encourage every single person who listens to this podcast, if you truly want to understand how awful this all is, and I mean awful, like, there's so many no-win situations for anybody involved in law enforcement and in public governance. Go watch The Wire. It's 5 seasons on HBO. It's like 10 episodes a season. So you get 50 episodes maybe to get through it. One of the best shows ever made, one of the most realistic cop shows ever made. But what's amazing about that show is the cops are messed up. The criminals are messed up. The department is messed up. The city hall is messed up. The school district's messed up. The show is about how people are just trying to get by and do what they need to do, whether it's from because the show will show things from the gang member drug dealer's perspective. It'll show things from the narcotics investigator's perspective, shows things from city hall's perspective. And when you truly see how messed up everything is, you will really understand that there are people who want to do the right thing and they are getting stopped at every turn by people more interested in power and politics and money. And that's the real truth of it to me. There are cops who want to do the Lord's work. And then there are cops that want to promote.
Mm.
And there are cops that accidentally promote while doing the Lord's work. And they're the rarest breed of all.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's my
I can
soapbox.
see that. I mean, it's a doomed way that policies and some laws are going, because they're going the way of feelings and not law and facts and things like that. And it's just, it's crazy. And I think a lot of it started, and it's been going on for years, but it really got kicked off with BLM with Ferguson.
Mm.
And then after Ferguson, it kind of
Freddie
fizzled out
Gray
for
in
a little bit.
Baltimore,
Yeah, well, that one.
which is interesting because The Wire is set in Baltimore. So if you are curious about like the internal workings of Freddie Gray and stuff like that, like go watch it. But
And it kind of simmered out. And then you had something that happened in New York, and then it simmered out again. And then all of a sudden, I think it was dormant for like, we had little pop-ups here and there for about a year or two. And then all of a sudden, the George Floyd thing happened. And then things just went off the rails. And look, there's going to be cops doing bad things,
yes,
just like there's doctors doing bad things.
yes,
But departments also need to rethink that their policies and procedures when it comes to restraining people and things like that. Because if an officer acts within policy, he shouldn't be railroaded and certain things and aspects. And I'm not going to get into anything like that, but you start looking at, the officer did this, the officer did that, and we need to reimagine all these different policies and laws to make it, I guess, equal, even though it's not equal. And now crime in certain areas is going to skyrocket.
yeah,
You're going to have, dangerous felons just walking around. Then they're going to get their egos really high. Then their crimes are going to get even more brazen.
Mhm.
Things are going to get more dangerous. Home invasions are going to get worse. And you're going to be stuck with a whirlwind of violent and nasty crime. And you've already seen in certain areas, especially in California, Prop 4757, crime has spiked. Even as much as you want to try to hide it, crime has spiked. And
how can you?
it's crazy. And then you have all this other stuff. I mean, I'm really worried. And when I talk to other people, they're like, well, I'm kind of worried crime's getting bad. I said, I'm worried for you, because a lot of the times it's cops' hands are tied, and this area is getting overrun with calls, and
Mhm.
it's going to get more dangerous, and it's not safe for the citizens. It's not safe for the officers. And it's getting to a point where it's going to either break and the pendulum's going to swing back the other way, or it's just going to be the Wild Wild West. And I don't know. It's kind of frightening to think about that.
Yeah,
Well, let me read you a headline from today. This is fresh
perfect
today.
timing.
California lawmakers want to reverse Prop 47, in quotes, make crime illegal again. There's a hearing that's coming up to reverse Prop 47.
Well,
Really?
gee, I wonder why. Is there anything happening this year? Can anybody think of something happening this year that might influence
It can't be election, can it?
No,
don't
no,
know.
no. That's cynical. It wouldn't be. It wouldn't be
No,
that it's a
it wouldn't be an
midterm election
election.
year, right? I mean,
No, not at all.
we're overturning Prop 47 and we're lifting COVID restrictions in an election year, but that's just coincidence. That is seriously just coincidence.
Ironic.
I mean,
So
I
great.
think honestly, the government removing COVID restrictions and trying to change some of these stupid laws in an election year is more transparent and than a pretext stop.
Yeah,
Dude.
it's too late,
Well,
man.
Ken, I want to give you the last word as we close out, because I love having you on, and you bring, as the background whisperer, you bring a wisdom of knowledge and experience to this show that I really enjoy.
I just want to mention that if you hear this stuff and you hear anything that's attached to some kind of social justice thing, society's going to pay, and you need to vote these people out, these that make these kind of policies. And that's the bottom line. Is it's not going to help. It's not meant to help the common citizen. It's
Right.
it's gonna hurt.
That statue of Lady Justice, any Metallica fan knows she's blindfolded, right? She's supposed to be blindfolded because justice is supposed to be blind. It's
Mhm.
supposed to apply equally. But as soon as you start making social justice laws, you are effectively cutting holes in the blindfold. Instead of demanding social justice, you should be demanding justice done right. And that's blind. If it's driving while black, call it out when you see it. And I'm talking to the members of the black community, the members of the Hispanic community, the members of the white community, white cops, black cops, Hispanic cops. When Gladys Kravitz calls about the guy in her neighborhood, drive over to her house and say, ma'am, what was wrong? Why were you suspicious? What's going on? That's actually doing police work. That is calling people on their bullshit. And that's really what we need more of.
Make them say it out loud.
Yeah.
So they hear
make
it.
them say, well, I mean, he was black. You go,
Oh.
okay. So that's the only reason. Thank you very much. Don't call for that anymore.
Mhm.
Call people on their bullshit. Do not manufacture bullshit so that you can avoid the hard topics. Because let's face it, there are hard topics and hard discussions that we need to have in this country right now. They're very hard topics
Yep.
and discussions that we need to have in this country right now. And I'm willing to have them. Unfortunately, I'm only willing to have them with adults.
Well
So,
said.
anyway, Ken, I want to thank you. How can everybody, first of all, I call you the background whisperer. If you guys are looking to get involved in law enforcement, and I thought I would ask you, Ken, do you help anybody going into a background process for a public safety job? Do you help firefighters or do you help parole officers or so anybody that's going through a background investigation for a public safety position, you can help them as well.
Yeah, there's a difference between civilian positions like firefighters and police that are sworn, but the application process they're the same. And
Right.
so
The
I help
criteria may be
anybody.
different.
Yeah, but it's just as simple as that. But yeah, I've been doing it a long time, and I know backgrounds, and I'm able to, I'm always willing to help people who want to apply, and we need good people in there. So yeah, give me a holler.
Now especially. But I if you're crazy enough to want to do it, Ken will be the guy. Where can they reach you, Ken?
At www.policebackground.net. And that'll go there, fill out a contact form, get a hold of me. Also, we also have the police applicant podcast that you can find it on Apple or Spotify, and just there's tons of stuff. Tomorrow we're going to record episode 31. So we're doing pretty good episode.
Oh, look at that. All right.
Yeah.
And
Nice.
and where they can, it's called the Police Applicant Podcast. That's like, I'm assuming Apple Podcast, Spotify, Google, all that stuff. Okay,
Mhm.
great. So
Yeah.
guys, check that out. That we get people all the time asking for where can they find more content like us. So if you're interested in that kind of content, Ken's got that. What kind of people do you have on, and what kind of things do you discuss? I mean, obviously background stuff and application stuff, but
tomorrow we're going to do an episode. We have a series called A Day in the Life. We're going to interview a SWAT trainer, and he teaches SWAT operators regionally. And we've done the PHS, the application, You Lie, You Die, the poly, the psych, everything that has to do with hiring. And there's an episode for it.
Let's do me a favor. Ask him if the whole standing next to the target during a live fire exercise is truly necessary in SWAT training.
Only if you're tough. If you're tough. So,
anyway, well, thank you. And again, if the background whisper is yours, it's my gift to you. If backgroundwhisper.com is available, go with God. Enjoy.
Oh, that's funny, man.
But people can also find you on Instagram at LA_backgrounds 13. Okay, so you can follow Ken there. Got great information. In fact, that's kind of where this pretext stop conversation came from, as Ken posted about it. We were already thinking about talking about it, and I hit Ken up and I said, let's do it. Let's get into that, because that's a debate, man. And there's a lot of these debates to be had. So these war stories, sometimes we go into policies and procedures, because this is the shit that civilians really do need to understand, because when you see these articles in the news, it's going to be dominated by the opinions of the people writing them. And you should really understand what they're talking about from a a non-biased perspective. Well, a little biased because we think they're a good tool, but there's pros and cons, and it is a debate to be had, but it is not a debate to be had lightly. And like I said, it's a conversation needs to be had, but it needs to be had by grown-ups.
Yeah.
Hey, Ken, I got a question for you.
Mm.
We get questions frequently regarding hiring questions, any advice and things like that. And I often give them advice and things like that and pointers.
Don't.
And then I asked Tom, like, hey, you have any advice for this person? And we give our advice. And then I generally send them over to you. But I'm thinking, since we get a good amount of it, why don't I just post your link to your website in our bio? That way,
Yeah,
I can give them advice and then say, hey, if you want to get
head to
more
our bio.
advice, head to our bio and click on the background. And that's a good friend of the podcast, Ken, and he does a lot of background. He's a background investigator, and I can give them that info. Would you be up for that?
Oh, much appreciated. Yeah, I'm always willing to help anybody out. And like I said, I've been doing it a long time, and I'm pretty sure I can answer almost any question. And I do full consultations with people too. So
Awesome.
yeah, absolutely. That's very kind of you.
Okay. Yeah. Awesome. Great. And I guys just listen. I often repost a lot of Ken's things because they have relevance. They're very good topics, and I often repost them. Maybe once a week, every 2 weeks, I'll see something and I'll repost it. So if you see that, go give him a follow, and then you can have his info. We will then post a link in our bio. That way, if you are thinking about joining, or you need a background, or you want to know, like, what can I do to improve, and or topics to hit while on the oral interview, which we get quite frequently, you guys can head there.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
So I think that about does it. You guys know where to find us on social media. You can reach us on Facebook and Instagram. You can also go to our website, www.warstoriesofficial.com. We still have Wibby hoodies. We still have, we've got some new stuff going on. We have been exploring a YouTube channel where Chuck and I will be debriefing some of these body cam videos and some of these law enforcement videos that our listeners send us. So look for that soon. We haven't decided how we're going to do that. It may be a subscription. It may not be, because at this point we're starting to grow the channel, but we're going to need to start getting some support from our listeners. So I would say just any way you can support us, just you can do so by following us on social media, sharing us with your friends, and going to us, getting stickers, getting merch, getting t-shirts, getting our Whoopee hoodie, and help us keep the lights on and help us keeping you great content like our background whisperer Ken here. So until our next episode, come home with your shield or on it.